Continuous praise to the Most High God, King of heaven and earth, God of our forefathers, even the God of Abraham, the God of Yisrael, and the God of Yisrael. I bid you all in the tongue of our forefathers, Shabbat Shalom Lakem. So how's everybody feeling? Congregation is still growing. Israelites are still having babies. Wherever Daniel went, tell him I said, you got it, bro. There's some people you just got to be like, you got it. What's he on, like kid number 82? I ain't even mad at him. It's like, yo. But it's a blessing, and the Most High God is good. And I do know I said before we broke that I would have an announcement for the afternoon. We're going to get into the lesson for the day, the book of Daniel, chapter 8. And then after we do that, then we'll get to that. And so let's take a second to talk about Daniel, right? So we've been going through the whole book, and we've been going through the history of who this man was. And Daniel was a Judite, correct? Okay. And you know, he was down in Babylon. And you know, y'all got me all excited singing during the breaks, and I'm starting to lose my voice some. So I'm going to ask somebody to bring me some water. And as he's going, there's a lot of things happening. He came into Babylon as a young man. And he was dealing with the Chaldeans. And God is proving himself to Israel and to foreigners. Because he's letting these foreigners know, just because you put your hand on my people, I'm still God. He's letting them know that everything that y'all have going on in your life, everybody still has to answer to me. Torah. And so we see Daniel beginning to prophesy, and we see him beginning to give visions. And you know, the thing about the book of Daniel is things were happening here that wasn't happening in any other place in the world. See, the focus went from the land of Israel to the land of Babylon. And the Israelites were actually in like 3 places. We were in Babylon. And then there were those who were the remnant of the land that the Most High God allowed to stay there. And there were those who didn't listen to the prophecy of Jeremiah and stopped and said, go down into Babylon and serve the Chaldeans. And they went and they ran to Egypt. Right. What happened to them? The Chaldeans followed them there, and they got destroyed there. And I tell you, Israelites are bold, because Israelites went and took Jeremiah with them. And like, we ain't listening to you, and you coming with us. Like, what in the world is going on here? So now, God made a prophecy through Jeremiah, but now he's going to reveal to Daniel what's going to happen in the next couple of dynasties. And everybody doesn't have the ability to get that information. He's saying, Daniel, I'm going to let you know this stuff that's going on. And I'm going to tell you how this goes, because even though y'all are going back in 70 years, that's not the end of the story. What y'all did is not worth the 70 years of captivity. We don't like to accept that. We don't like to deal with the fact that you can actually accrue so much sin and transgression that God will deal with you and your children for thousands of years to come. And so I want us to read from verse 27 of chapter 7, which is the last 2 verses of the last chapter. And I want us to understand about what was going on in Daniel's mind. He's seeing these visions, and he's trying to understand what God is telling him without God explaining to him everything that's happening. And this is important, because we read this Bible, we read this book, we read this holy scriptures, and we stop and we think that we're going to understand everything that's written in the scriptures, or that the person that's up here teaching is going to be able to explain to you everything that's in the holy scriptures. And guess what? The people who lived this that God was talking to did not understand everything God was saying, and didn't understand everything about the holy scriptures. And that did not invalidate everything that these men were saying. Because God is God, God is great beyond measure, and no man or woman can understand everything that God has to say. So when Daniel is hearing these things, he's confused. But we'll see at the end of this, he said he kept the matter in mind. It goes on to read.
We're in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 27, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And the kingdom, and the dominion, and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey them. Here is the end of the matter.
The end of the matter.
As for me, Daniel, my thoughts much affrighted me.
He was scared. And
my countenance was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart.
But I kept the matter in mind. It scared me. It made me a different type of person because of what I seen. Because of what's going on here is strange. But I'm going to keep it in my mind because I know that God is trying to tell me something. How many of us have had that type of dream? How many of us have had that type of encounter that we're stopping and we're saying, God is trying to tell me something, but I don't know what it is, but I know I need to change. We don't like that part of God. We're enamored with that part of God, but we don't like that part of God. I know God wants me to know something, but what is it? It makes you feel weird. It makes you feel strange, but you kind of just deal with it and you move on. I'm telling you, don't run from that thought. I'm telling you, don't run from that feeling. Because that feeling that you have when God is talking to you like that, he will reveal himself eventually. It's just that it may not be for the time for you to understand. But God will let you know. He said, I kept the matter in heart. He kept the matter in heart. And now here goes God coming to Daniel again. Unannounced. Not something was happening in the world that it was a great thing. Unannounced. And God is sitting there speaking to him, revealing things to him. Because why? Daniel was the one that God chose to reveal these things to the rest of the world so that the Israelites would one day understand what was happening to them. God didn't come and tell him, you know, I'm letting you know this now so you can write it down and eventually somebody else down the line will understand what I'm doing. He didn't do that. Remember Abraham? We're about to get to that point. Well, we got past that point, excuse me. When God told him that your children will serve a strange nation. Right. What was the point of that? Why was that happening? What was going on? Abraham saw the vision. Abraham saw the vision. But who was going to live it? His children some 300-400 years later. And he was just revealing it to him so that later on we would understand how God works. So it's the same thing with Daniel. Let's pick it up and read.
Chapter 8, verse 1, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw the vision. Now it was so, that when I saw, I was in Shushan, the castle, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was by the stream Ulat. And I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the stream a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last.
Right. And that's not how it usually works with rams, right? I said the last time when I was talking about genes and everything of that nature, I was talking about everything being asymmetrical, right? And so one horn shouldn't be higher than another horn. And when he stopped and he had this vision, and he stopped and he had this dream, he was by a stream, and there was a ram there. And he was like, it's a ram with 2 horns, but it caught his attention because this ram, one horn was bigger than the other, or higher than the other. It goes on to read.
4. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, and no beast could stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and magnified himself.
Right. So obviously this ram wasn't just there, but whatever's happening in the dream, the ram was showing his strength. And he could begin to understand that the ram is representative of a kingdom. And so when he stopped and did that, Daniel, more than likely, I'm extrapolating from the history, that more than likely he understood the other dreams that he had, where he seen the image, and there was the image of gold, and it had the iron and the clay and all of that other stuff. And he stopped and looked at it, and here now that we have this ram that's going northward and southward, eastward and westward, no matter where he went, wherever in the world, he was strong. This was representative of a kingdom, but the Most High God is using a ram. Now, I want us to understand this thing about dreams and about visions. Usually, God speaks to us on terms that we can understand. Usually. While he's speaking to us on terms that we can understand, we also have to understand that he's putting it in such a way that we understand that there's something different there that allows us to put things into perspective. For example, Moses in the burning bush. We call it the burning bush, but Moses said himself, he observed the bush, but it wasn't burning. It consumed not. And that's what actually made him look closer, draw closer, where God finally said, the ground on which you stand is holy ground. Remove your shoes. I'm saying all of that because as he's looking at this ram with the one horn higher than the other, and that is going westward and northward and southward, and it didn't say eastward, he's sitting down and he's saying that there's something different about this ram. He said, and he magnified himself. And him magnifying himself is important because God is in the matter. And I'm telling y'all that as we go through these books, you will see that there was a time transitioning in the world as religion was beginning to become great in the world, that men were magnifying themselves above God. And men were stopping and saying to people that I am God, as we seen with the king of Babylon, as he was humbled and God made him a beast. And you had with the pharaohs of Egypt that stopped and said, I'm God. And people stopping and saying, oh, the sun is God, and the river is God, and the wind is a God. And people had their pantheons of gods. That he's letting Daniel know that even though I'm proving myself to these Chaldeans, there's going to still be kingdoms of men who put themselves above me. Don't fret that. Don't worry about that. All those things going on, these things are going to continue to go on in the world until a certain time. And so I stop and I say, it's like, for Daniel, he had to understand that history had to play its course. We don't like to accept that. We want to stop and rush God like history hasn't already been dictated to a certain degree according to the Holy Scriptures. Thousands of years ago, the Most High God told us that all these things were going to happen, and he revealed it to certain men. The question is, do we read it and do we understand it and apply it and take it for what it is? I want to see the Most High God reveal himself to the children of men in my lifetime. But the reality is, and I take a page out of my mentor's book, Moreh Mishael ben Yisrael, blessed be his memory. You can't rush God. There's nothing about this. Who am I that God is going to reveal himself in my generation like I've done something so great? If God reveals himself in my generation, then I have been granted enough mercy to see it in my time. That's how it goes. Chief of Chiefs spoke this morning about learning how not to be so selfish anymore. It's not always about me, and it's not always about the people around me, but it's always about God.
Amen.
And so when we stop and we see this thing, you sit down, you be like, you just saw a king humbled and turned into a beast, Daniel, right? But don't worry about it. That's still not going to make them change. You seen the other king where I showed that all these fake prophets and astronomers and astrologers and everything that they had, soothsayers, I proved to you that they were all frauds, but y'all already knew that already. But that's not going to be enough for them. How often do we go and talk to people about God and they stop and they say, oh, you a Hebrew Israelite? You're one of those? Oh, the Bible is fake. You know, before there was a Torah, there was Lilith, you know. Like, who in the world is Lilith? You don't know Lilith? It's because you don't read, brother. You don't know who Marduk is, do you? I'll tell you right now. I'm telling y'all right now. If y'all read Genesis 1.5, this might all become a little bit clearer to y'all. But y'all not woke. Your third eye still got some sand on it. Still got a little bit of sleep on it. And once you decide to rub it and clear it, you'll get it. Can't understand everything about God. People been lying about God since the beginning of time. People been stopping and saying this is God and that's God since the beginning of time. People been trying to convince people not to believe in God since the beginning of time. Yet all of us can understand there's everything about us that we can't quite put our hand on to understand everything about who we are. Can't understand how my brain works. I know it's working, but there's sometimes that it does some things that I'm just like, why is it like that? And so they have scientists that have been studying the human brain and human behavior and things of that nature. And we go through all of this stuff, and then they stop and they say, oh, even though we've had this study, it's not consistent in all human beings. And so you have people who theorized. I said that right? Who have their theories on who God is and the different things going on in the world. And so Daniel, who's a God-fearing man, who prayed 3 times a day, who they went through their political struggles and tried to kill him and threw in the lion's den, and that they seen that God was with him, now he's sitting down trying to understand what God is trying to tell him, and God is not telling him the entire matter. He's only telling him part of the matter. Point being, don't think you're going to understand everything, because that's not how it works with God. Amen. Don't think that you're going to open up this book, read a chapter, and as soon as you read it once, you're going to understand what you need to do. That's not how it works. Where people who live with the way God has designed us, that we go through transitions in life. And as we go through transitions in life, based on the decisions that we make, we will either elevate ourselves or make ourselves base. And we don't like to accept that, but that's how it is. Daniel has proved himself enough that when he stops and sees this, God is actually showing him everything that's going to happen to the children of Yisrael right here in this chapter. It goes on to read.
5. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west over the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram which had 2 horns, which I saw standing before the stream, and ran at him in the fury of his power.
At the fury of his power. Now, first of all, if anybody seen a goat and a ram, goats and rams should not be fighting. And if they are fighting, the goat is a fool. The ram has very big horns. The ram is a well-developed beast. A goat, I mean, he can be, listen, a goat can be strong to me and you. But for those of you who don't know, the way goats and rams fight, they butt heads. They, as we say, ram at each other, right? And that fight can actually last for hours. They sit down, they boom. They stop, they back up, boom. And I've seen rams fight before, and I gotta tell you, you'd be like, ain't nobody dizzy yet? But they rams, I can't expect more. They're a bunch of beasts. I don't go. But every once in a while, the ram gets an angle because they have to put their head down. And when they hit, somebody's horns break. And let me tell you something about rams. They ain't that stupid. Once their horn break, it's like, you got it. And you know, they fight for different reasons. Territory, the right to mate, who's going to be the king of the group, herd, what you have going on here. Don't let me get started. And And so I stop and we look at this goat. The thing about this goat is he has the conspicuous horn. The third horn. Like most goats have 2 horns. So what is this third horn happening? But what did I tell you? God has to do something in order that will get Daniel's attention, that he might understand what's going on here. We seen that happen with the king of Egypt, right? And Yosef. We seen the cows come up by the river, right? 7 well-fed and 7 lean of flesh. And the ones lean of flesh ate the 7 that were well-fed, right? And y'all heard me teach this before. Do cows eat cows? Cows eat grass, right? And so, to make it worse, the king of Egypt seen the next dream, and it was 7 stalks of corn, right? And the 7 stalks of corn were well flourished, and the other 7 were withered. And then what happened? The 7 withered ate the 7 that were flourished. And if there's one thing I know for sure, corn doesn't have a mouth, it doesn't have teeth, and if you're looking at that in a dream, that's no longer a dream, that's a nightmare. Right. It's just how it goes. Right. And so now, we're sitting down, we're looking at this goat that's fighting a ram, and it seems like the goat should lose, but he has the one conspicuous horn. But God is talking to Daniel. It reads.
7. And I saw him come close unto the ram. And he was moved with choler against him and smote the ram and broke his 2 horns.
Both the horns.
And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled upon him, and there was none that can deliver the ram out of his hand.
And what does it say?
And the he-goat magnified himself
exceedingly.
And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And instead of it, there came up the appearance of 4 horns toward the 4 winds of heaven.
Now, I want us to understand this. God is still talking to Daniel, and he's showing him some things, but the goat wasn't supposed to beat the ram. The goat beat the ram and broke both his horns. And now, the horn, the conspicuous horn, beat the other 2 horns, and then after that, 4 horns come out of that. And so, I want us to understand this. The reason why I had the last 2 verses read of chapter 7 is because he was already afraid of his last vision, talking about Daniel. His countenance already changed. And God is still showing him things that he probably at this point thinks, like, how come I keep getting these weird dreams? How come these things keep happening like this to me? But God is talking. And it reads.
9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south and toward the east and toward the beauteous land. And it waxed great, even the hosts of heaven, and some of the hosts and the stars it cast down to the ground and trampled upon them.
He's talking about the Israelites at this point, you know. I just want y'all to keep this in mind, because you got to kind of remember, as I start to break down who's who later on, you got to stop and remember. He's stopping and he's looking and he's like, what's happening here? And so, and it waxed, what it said, and out of them came forth the little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the beauteous land, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. Now, I'm not saying Daniel understood everything about this dream, but I'm saying that God was talking to him in terms that he would have to understand. Who is this host of heaven, and who's the stars that it cast down to the ground? He's referring to a certain people, and obviously with a goat going into the stars, it wouldn't be something that the goat went up into heaven, but we would have to begin to break down exactly what's happening.
11. Yea, it magnified itself even to the prince of the host.
The prince of the host.
And from him the continual burnt offering was taken.
It's a clue.
And the place of the sanctuary was cast down.
Another clue.
And a host was given over to it together with the continual burnt offering through transgression.
Through transgression. Stop right there. Right. This is the key part. Because we stop and we listen to all of this. And Daniel is wondering why he's seeing all these things. And God is revealing to him at the same time that all these things are happening. And all these things are going to continue to happen through transgression.
Amen.
Because the Israelites were in Babylon and they still weren't doing right before God. Just because God says you get 70 years, that don't mean like you can do what you will and at the end of 70 years just go back on in. You still got to do right. God has us in this captivity. God has it that we're paying for our sins and paying for the sins of our forefathers because of the great iniquity that they did. But that doesn't mean that we get to do anything we want whenever we want, when and if we feel like it, and God can't extend our captivity. It doesn't mean that. See, I stop and I say all the time, the way we want it, the way we would like it, is that we want God to reveal himself to us, tell us that we'll be out of here by 2028. Right. And then in 2028, no matter how wickedly I've done, I get to go on. As long as I make it to 2028, whew, that was a close one. And I walk right back into the land and I'll be like, yep, I made it. I'm part of the chosen. That's not how God works. Right. Who does that? Right. You can't continue to do wickedly and then expect to be accepted later on. That's not the God I serve. And God is sitting here letting Daniel know that there's still wickedness going on in Babylon. And there's still wickedness going on in the rest of the world that the children of Yisrael are perpetrating against him. And for that, I'm going to let other kingdoms continue to reign over them. We don't like that. I sit down and we say that we're in a captivity in America, and the captivity of South America, and the captivity of England and London and all those other different places all across the world, Brazil. And we erroneously believe that if any of these countries fall, that God has exacted vengeance on them, then it's our time to return home. And God is revealing right here and letting us know for times like this time right here that the kingdom could fall and somebody else could take over them. And it doesn't matter because you will change your slavery from one kingdom to another kingdom. That's what's happening here. We stop and we pray for the destruction of our enemies instead of praying to God and asking him to reveal to us how we can get ourselves right so he would save us. Stop saying so focused on your enemies and give a greater focus on yourself. Because when he said, and the host was given over to it together with the continual burnt offering. God is sitting there saying, it's like, I gave the people over and everything that they thought they were giving to me, I gave that over also. I don't want it anymore. And it cast down truth to the ground and it wrought and prospered. Did you read that part?
No, sir.
Please read it.
And it cast down truth to the ground, and it wrought and prospered.
And we can't believe that. How do you sit down and deny truth? But actually, we see it happen almost every day, right? There's a president in this country that tells lies to the people almost every day. And we stop and we look at the news in amazement like, when is this guy going to stop? Instead of admitting to ourselves that he's never going to stop. He's just a liar. He's always going to act like he doesn't do anything wrong. There's not an ounce of humility in his heart. And we're waiting for the day for him to stop and say, you know what, you guys were right. Is that how we're dealing with our enemies? Do our enemies just get to come up to us after doing us wrong for so long, and then one day stop and come and be like, hey, listen, everything is okay, brother. That's not how that works. Right. I just use him as an example because he's right here. You're my brother. I love you, bro. But I stop and I say, he's like, listen, that is not how that goes. And so when we stop and we look at what God is showing here, he's stopping telling the children of Israel like Daniel, I know you want to understand everything that's happening here, and I see you trying hard. And I let you become one of the 3 presidents of Babylon. And I elevated you, and I'm revealing things to you so that you can be comfortable in your time. Right. But I'm telling you, these people are up to no good. And I'm going to let them sit through captivity to captivity, and I'm going to reveal it to you so that later on when they see it, they can understand why I'm dealing with them the way that I'm dealing with them.
Okay.
And I stop and I say, we don't like that. We stop and we just like, listen, I want this to be over. All I know is I want to go home. If you really want to go home, you got to do what's necessary to go home. If you really want to be righteous, you got to do what's necessary to be righteous. You want to be rich? You got to do what's necessary in order to be rich. And part of being rich is not only doing the work to acquire riches, part of being rich is putting in the work to make sure you protect your riches so that nobody takes it from you. There's a formula to this. Lotto ain't saving you. How many people you know that hit the lotto and they stopped and said, I was saved? Rich people got problems the same way poor people got problems. It's just a different type of problem. And God is the judge of them all. And so that as we stop and we look and we're like, oh, God wouldn't let anybody disrespect his sanctuary? What do you mean God wouldn't let anybody disrespect his sanctuary when he allowed you to disrespect his sanctuary? And just because you don't outwardly disrespect God's sanctuary, with your actions, your very thoughts and your very words can disrespect God's sanctuary. Okay. The way you deal with this podium and the things that you allow to come off of it, when you make it for your own personal will, to make yourself look right before people, that's how you disrespect God in his sanctuary. Okay. This day ain't about you. It never been about you. And people can't get to that point because we're still selfish and self-involved. All right. Self-involved with how we want to be remembered. Right. Okay. Me. My legacy. Who I want to be, how I want people to remember me, and my time and my season, because I did this at this time, and 18 years ago I did this like this, and you know what? None of y'all don't remember, but I was doing some great things. Like, what are you talking about, and what are you doing right now? There's 6 other days of the week you can do that, and you choose to do that on the Shabbat day? He got me. You sit down and you like, you can't really be that self-involved. That's what got our forefathers there. The kings thought that it was about them. Didn't we just go through that history? Yes, right. Amen. The kings thought that it was what they wanted, how they could have power, how they could control people, how they could acquire wives, how they could stop and tell people anything and anything. If I want a vineyard, listen, what I'm gonna do about it, I'm gonna cry about it. I don't get it that way. I tell my wife about it and she kills him. Now I got it. Right. And think we weren't blaspheming the name of the Most High God. Right. You sit down, I want a wife. I'll send a man into battle. He'll die, then I can take his wife. Like God isn't watching. Right. God is watching us all. I'll stop and I'll show you how the things you do, I'll return it to your own head in your own house so you can stop and see it your own way. That's why I stop and I tell us, it's wisdom to some, but it torments others. Other people can stop and say, I don't want that to be me, and now I'm wise because I don't walk in that way. But the person who didn't listen, that person, it torments them because now you got to sit down the rest of your life and live with that. Look at it day by day. You think you're serving God, but you're only serving yourself. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, we don't like it. And so there's a time where we got to stop, and I say, take 15 minutes out of your entire week. Forget about the job. The job ain't going nowhere. And if the job is going somewhere, God already determined you're going to lose it. Take 15 minutes out. Because guess what? Whether you're sacrificing your tuition or you missed homework, the reality is 15 minutes won't kill you. Either you will get it or you won't get it. Right. And take some time to think about you and your relationship to God. Just stop and say, how is God dealing with me? And I'm not talking about focusing on the bad. I'm talking about focusing on good as well as the bad. If you got a house, thank God for your house. If you got a car, thank God for your car. If you got clothes, thank God for your clothes. If you got jewelry, thank God for your jewelry. If you got shoes, multiple shoes. I know you sisters got some shoes. And I know you brothers are sneakerheads. So I know y'all got some sneakers too. Thank God for what he gave you. And guess what? If God is giving you some pain, consider why God might be giving you some pain. We know when we do wrong. We know when we do wrong, and we know when we do people wrong. You sit down and say, when I did this, just ask yourself the question, when I did this, is this why God is putting me through this right now? It might actually give you some clarity. It might actually make you decide to open up that book. Get you some friends who read Holy Scriptures. Right. How do you expect somebody to pull your coattail and they don't know nothing about righteousness? The blind can't really lead the blind, right? So it's like the blind leading the blind, but the facetious part about it all is like, where y'all going? What are you doing? Nobody knows. So when you stop, if you got somebody who won't actually tell you the truth about what you're doing, who you are, and the way people are viewing you right now. I sit down and I say I got a friend, but he can't never talk to me about what I'm doing, because every time he's trying to talk to me about something, I go, listen, I don't want to hear that right now. Why is the Knicks 2-6? That's what I want to talk about right now.
You still watch the Knicks?
Shabbat, bro.
I'm just trying to give you some wisdom.
And so I stop and I say, as we get back to God, have friends that serve God. Have friends that's going to tell you the truth. Have friends that are going to be honest with you. How you want to be a leader and you got a bunch of yes men? That's not leading a kingdom. That's you being self-served once again. Am I right? Yes. Have I ever done anything wrong? No. They're wrong for telling me that I'm wrong. Yes. So I want to hear. Never want to do that which is right. We seen our kings do that. I'm talking about in this book. We've seen our kings do that. And so as time went on and different things were happening, we stop and we look, and have we learned our lessons from those kings? And do we allow our leaders to do the very same thing? Or are we trying to get better before God to show that he can establish his kingdom once again? This is what he's revealing to Daniel. Because as time goes on, you're going to see he's telling him things about the future. Vision after vision after vision after vision after vision. We're stopping and we're like, man, well, what's going on with the children of Israel? And why is Daniel seeing all of these things? And they'll stop and tell you, like, this is about the end of time. And at the end of the time, these different things are going to happen. And this is how this is going to meet this. Let me tell y'all something. God understands exactly what he made. Amen. He is not confused about who we are. Right. The confusion is with us. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. And so as we start to talk about time in a little while, I want us to understand God has all the time in the world. You know why? Because he exists outside of time as we know it. Time is there for us to have a time frame on what we should be doing in our lifetime. If we didn't have a concept of time, we couldn't observe the Shabbat day. But the fact is that God had a concept of time because he created time in everything that it is. But we'll read on. 13.
Then I heard a holy one speaking. And another holy one said unto that one certain one who spoke, how long shall the vision concerning the continual burnt offering and the transgression that causeth appallment to give to both the sanctuary and the host be trampled underfoot?
Right. How long is this going to keep going on like this? Because, you know, we're outside of our land and the sanctuary has been trashed. Daniel wanted to understand because he's thinking about right now. It reads.
14. And he said unto me, unto and 300 evenings and mornings. Then shall the sanctuary be victorious.
But don't forget, this is a vision. Because we hear evenings and mornings. We understand that the ram wasn't actually a ram, right? We understand that the goat wasn't actually a goat, right? And the horns weren't actually horns and the conspicuous horns and horns coming out of the horns, right? So when you read this and you see the 2,300 evenings and mornings, don't think those are literal evenings and mornings. He's letting him know that there is going to be a very long time, a very, very long time before things get back to the way that they're supposed to be.
Right.
And later on, as we read and he explains this, he's going to tell him, you don't understand everything about this. It goes on to read.
15. And it came to pass when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, that I sought to understand it
Stop.
as a whole.
And I sought to understand it. That means after he got finished with it, even he admitted he still doesn't know what's going on. Right? It reads.
There stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulah, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was terrified and fell upon my face.
Now I want us to understand this. God gave him the vision, and God let him see everything that was going on. And now here he goes where somebody else comes along and tells Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. I want us to see what's happening here. The same banks of Ulah, the same area. I need you to understand. And now he's terrified at what he's seeing because he doesn't really understand what's going on. It goes on to read.
But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for the vision belongeth to the time of the end.
Right, he's letting him know this is at the end of it all. At that, when everything is going to stop and God has fulfilled his punishment to the children of Israel, that's when this vision is for. Meaning that you won't see this in your time. I know you want to see it and you want to understand it. Like you're going to walk outside tomorrow and see it, because the other visions that he had, when the king of Babylon went and he became a beast, the Chaldean king, he went and he seen that happen and he's still living. But you're not going to see the end of this, Daniel. It goes on to read.
18. Now as he was speaking with me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face toward the ground.
Sleeping again.
But he touched me and set me upright.
Right.
And he said, behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the latter time of the indignation.
What is indignation? What is indignation? Hatred. Hatred. Just that burning hatred that you can have. I will make thee to know what shall be in the latter time of the indignation. Things are going to get worse, Daniel. It reads.
For it belongeth to the appointed time of the end.
Like the first guy told you. It reads.
20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia.
Right, they're coming up next. You're in the Babylonian captivity, but the kings of the Medes and the Persians are coming up next. It goes on.
And the rough he-goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king.
Yeah, the first king. Who's that first king? Alexander the Great. See, what was happening through history, we stop and we see we had the king of Babylon. And the Babylonians came in, and you had Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadrezzar and the different kings that were coming along. But eventually through history, you're living this, but I'm telling you the next kingdom that's going to come up. And the Medians and the Persians are two kingdoms that are going to intertwine. Because when the Babylonians came along, Darius the First came. And when Darius the First came, he conquered the Chaldeans. And he took over the Babylonians. And then as time would go on, there would be more kings within that Mede Empire. Right? But eventually, Cyrus the Great would come along, who was a Persian king, and he would destroy the Medes, and that he would then take over their empire. But you got people who are living somewhat in the same land, taking over the same territories. And don't think that that's weird, because the Middle East has had conflict since the beginning of time. And so when we stop and we look at Mesopotamia, and we look at all the different kings that reigned over it, we seen those different things that happened. But as time went on and Cyrus the Great was there, you still had Medes around. It's not like they were totally destroyed, like they were annihilated, like genocide happened. So then you had an intermarriage between the Persian royalty and the former Mede royalty, and then they had Darius III. And Darius III found himself in power, and he had one son that we know eventually by the name of Xerxes. And we've seen Xerxes in movies, and we see throughout history, even through the book of Esther, who people often refer to this Xerxes as King Ahasuerus, that we see in our own history, and that he would do very great and wicked things against us, right? And we know from the history of Purim that they went and they wanted to destroy the Israelites through that wicked leader Haman, and that the Most High God destroyed it on their heads, and that eventually that there was a law and an edict that even though people on the 13th and the 14th day of Tevet, that they could destroy Israelites, they gave us the right to defend ourselves. And when that happened in that day, we indeed defended ourselves. And I think there was a great, in the efforts of time, there was a great victory for the Israelites that day, and it averted great danger. And so Daniel is actually seeing all of these things happen because he's understanding that the continual burnt offering would be taken away. But then came up a young king of Macedonia, of Greece, which would be King Alexander. And he was a warring king. And he didn't reign for too long. He died a young man. But we see there that he said, did we read that part, 21? Yes. And the rough he-goat is the king of Greece. That's who that young he-goat was, right? And that young he-goat had the two horns, but he had one conspicuous horn. And as Alexander's going through the world and he's conquering the world and everything that's happening, the rough he-goat that's being talked about here and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, is that King Alexander, who would stop and people would stop and think, nobody can stop him. Right. He's a great general. He likes to fight. He's a master strategist when it comes to war. So a lot of people just bow to him. But God is always in the matter. It reads
22. And as for that which was broken,
right,
in the place whereof four horns stood up, four kingdoms shall stand out of the nation, but not with his power.
Right, because the four that will come out of him and the four horns that they're speaking of, King Alexander died at a very young age. And so when he died, they knew he was dying. What did they say? He died from like, I forgot what they call that, wine fever. And so when he was dying, they stopped and they asked King Alexander. They said, who should rule? And of course, him being the man who he was like, to the strongest. Now, I want us to understand, of those four kings, of those four generals that King Alexander had, when he told them it should be to the strongest, and they eventually decided to just divide up the territories amongst the four of them, you had Seleucus, you had Ptolemy, you had, why am I guessing this one? I wrote it down. You had Cassander, and you had, I'm going to say Antagonist or Antigonus. And of those four, they split up the kingdom. However, as we know, there were different parts of our captivity. Of those four generals, there was one, Seleucus, who had great influence, a lot of charm. He understood how to make people do things his way. And from that Seleucus, you had Antiochus the First. Right. And from Antiochus the First, you eventually had a child that came forth, Antiochus Epiphanes. And Antiochus Epiphanes would be the one that would take away the continual burnt offering. That would be the one in the time of the Maccabees that will come and destroy us and think to destroy the people and anybody who didn't do the way that the Greeks did. This is how he had these things going on. And they stopped. Antiochus Epiphanes was so influential, he had everybody throughout his own kingdom because he had institutions which stopped and taught about the Greek way, and he also developed Greek customs and holidays that stopped and made the people believe that it was okay for them to do things the way Greeks were doing things because it was all in the name of the holiday as opposed to you conforming to who they are. So there you can have a thing where it stops and says, hey, listen, you don't really have to eat the pork. I'm going to put some lamb up there, and I'm going to tell the people that it's pork and eat that so I won't have to kill you. And so we stop and we begin to understand why the people didn't want to do that, because they understood that it would cause other people to believe that it's okay to eat pork. Why am I saying that? Because we just came out of Halloween, right? And that stupid holiday just passed. And so we stop and we say, people are so far into this thing right now. We stop and they say, they're like, listen, what are you doing for Halloween? Nothing. I'm going home. Well, we got this party going on. They'd be like, I don't do that because I don't observe the dead. That's not what Halloween is about. Watch me over there. Gotcha. And so we stop and we look and you say, it's not about the dead anymore. And you stop and you say, how's it not about the dead anymore? Oh, because it's about the kids now. But actually they're adopting practices that the Greeks have been doing for millennia. They stop and they believe the way they get you into it, the way they get you to buy into it is they commercialize it. They change the narrative. They make it something different than it already is. First it was All Hallows Eve. And it was about demons and getting demons out. And the trick or the treat is, listen, you don't know what you're going to get at that door. To now, listen, you ain't got to dress up like a demon anymore. You can dress up like Batman. Everybody likes Batman, right? Everybody likes Superman, right? Dress up like a superhero, right? And listen, it's about candy. Until you go and pick up some candy and you find out that it's been laced with meth. That just happened in the news, right? Okay. 3 adults being sent to the hospital because they took some Halloween candy that was laced with meth. Tricks on you. And we stop and you go, you think it's all good until you walk up to the door and they ring the bell and they open up the door. And who is it? A white lady in blackface saying, hey, I'm Diana Ross. Telling y'all what we walk into and what we do. And you stop and you can't even accept the custom for what it is. It has wicked origins and they're trying to convince you that it's okay. So I'm sitting there telling you about Antiochus Epiphanes. Pay attention when the history of Maccabees is being taught. Because the reality is that the same things that were happening in those times is what's happening in these days and times. That's how they got you away from God. That's how they got you away from the customs. They stopped and they made Hanukkah the Black Christmas. And they stopped and they told you this is how you can get presents. Even though this is not what God talks about. They stopped from calling you holy and they began to call you saints. And you stop, and if you read the Hebrew, you look and you say, 1 minute they use the word kadosh as holy, and that's going through the whole book. Then when you get into the book of Daniel and the word saint, they use the word kadosh again, which still means holy. Why did they insert saint at that time? Unless they wanted you to think a certain way. Unless they wanted to change the narrative to keep you away from God. And so as we stop and we look at this and we see this man, when they talk about Antiochus Epiphanes, he's sitting there and he's telling Daniel, I know you think what's happening here is bad, but trust me, there will be a time in the future that things will get really bad. That prayer you're doing 3 times a day in your window, people ain't going to be able to do that. It goes on to read.
23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have completed their transgression, there shall stand up a king of fierce countenance and understanding stratagem.
Which is strategy?
And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and do. And he shall destroy them that are mighty, and the people of the saints.
Which are those holy ones? Come on.
And through his cunning.
Through his cunning.
Through his cunning he shall craft to prosper in his hand. And he shall magnify himself in his heart. And in that time of security shall he destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. But he shall be broken without hand.
Right, he shall be broken without hand. Because what happens? He's going to destroy many of the Israelites. And even the prince of the people, he's going to take them down. And he's going to stop and he's going to look everywhere where Israelites are trying to rise up. He's going to seek to destroy them. But what's going to happen? His own people are going to kill him. He's going to end up being assassinated in a time and a season. And I'm going to take care of that. But I want y'all to look at this last part that as we read the book of Daniel, I want us to understand what God is saying to Daniel. You're not going to understand everything. It reads.
26. And a vision of the evenings and mornings.
Yeah, the 2,300. Come on.
But thou, shut thou up the vision, for it belongeth to many days to come.
That's not for right now. I understand you think it's for now, but that's not right. That's not for right now. Because 2,300 evenings and mornings, what is that, 2,300 days? Which if we do our math, averages out to 6.3 years. But he's like, Daniel, don't count that. Don't worry about that. Why? For it belongs to many days to come. What you're thinking about in the concept of time does not apply to that right now. And I'm not telling you when it applies. And it reads.
27. And I, Daniel, fainted.
He fainted.
And was sick certain days.
For a while. Go ahead.
Then I rose up and did the king's business. And I was appalled at the vision, but understood it not.
And so
hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And so I want us to understand this. Even after it was explained to him, he still didn't understand. And even when we thought that we understood, we don't understand. So I can explain this to you, and I can break down about the different kingdoms of what's going on and who's going to do what. But you cannot look at this book and stop and say, oh, by the year 2020, God is going to visit his people, and God is going to eventually take us back to our land. Stop believing you know the plans of God. Let God work in his time. Let God allow righteousness to speak for him. As for us, it's time for us to understand how to prepare to meet our God, to get ourselves right with ourselves, then one another, and heal from the wounds that we have. Because the reality of the matter is that we have been going through things and we've been offending each other for so long. We got things that are unresolved that we don't even know how to resolve anymore. We got things that need to make us better as a people that we can't understand how it will make us better as a people. And so I stop and I say, as one of the leaders of this congregation, and as your Moreh, it's time for us to heal, it's time for us to build, and it's time for us to grow. And part of that building and growing process is making sure we take care of ourselves and protect what we have and understand everything that we have to do.